Welcome everyone to our Fall Family University of Community Consolidated District 89. I'm here with a variety of our social workers from all levels. Kristen Payne, who is the social worker at Briar Glen. Kristen Kazanovitz, one of the social workers at Glencrest. Lauren Prescott from Westfield. Erin Walsh from Parkview. And I am I'm Katie Crowler. I'm the Director of Student Services here in District 89. So we have probably about a 25 to 30 minute presentation for you today, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So we are just going to hop right in.
All right, well, I'm going to start us off and talk about what SEL is and why it's important. SEL stands for Social Emotional Learning, and it does all sorts of great stuff. It increases pro-social behaviors like kindness, sharing, and empathy. It improves student attitudes towards school, improves achievement, and reduces depression and stress. Overall, effective social and emotional learning involves coordinated classroom, school-wide, family, and community practices. And we partner with CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It's a trusted source of knowledge. It provides high-quality, evidence-based social emotional learning. So CASEL helps us with our lessons, with data collection, and all sorts of things, and they're nearby, which is really nice. CASEL's mission is to help make evidence-based social and emotional learning an integral part of education, all the way down from preschool, our little learners, up to high school. And we look at the CASEL wheel, which focuses on 5 of the SEL core competencies. And this really leads our instruction when we go into classrooms to do SEL. We typically start with self-awareness. That's really knowing yourself, knowing your feelings, understanding what makes you feel certain ways, what you're good at, what your strengths are. We move into self-management, which is really managing your emotions, staying in control, managing your stress, and then managing your goals as well. We move down then into social awareness, which involves perspective taking, understanding how other people feel. Those are kind of the yellow portions of the wheel, really has to do with other people, understanding social and ethical norms, and just recognizing who can help you at school and outside of school as well. That moves us into relationship skills. That's when we think about friendships, being able to work with a group, communicating clearly, and being able to work cooperatively, also resolving conflicts. And then that leaves responsible decision making. So kind of just understanding your responsibility to behave, making safe decisions, evaluating consequences, and just making good choices at school and outside of school as well. And then this is just another look at the wheel and kind of zooms in on kind of other areas that are promoted. So examples are emotional literacy, increasing empathy, optimism, that intrinsic motivation, that wanting to learn, just that drive, that curiosity to learn. But SEL does cover a lot of different topics. And then this is one other look at the wheel that really looks at who is involved in helping with SEL. So we look at the classroom level, at the school level, and then even at the family level and at the community level. At school, we're teaching and modeling SEL skills throughout the day. We're embedding it throughout the day, throughout curriculum, and really trying to create a positive school climate and building that sense of community. And then at the family and community level, reinforcing those SEL skills at home is so helpful. And then just opportunities to engage in after-school activities that promote the same thing. And then you can see across these kind of rectangles that when we learn SEL skills, they really provide a foundation for lots of different things. So we're teaching, the first step is teaching those explicit SEL skills, integrating that into the curriculum, looking at that kind of improves your attitudes about yourself and about others and schools. And then lastly, that can result in that positive social behavior, fewer conduct problems, less emotional distress, and overall academic success, which is really exciting stuff.
Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about mental health today. So what the current trends are that 1 in 6 youth age 6 to 17 has a mental health disorder. So one of the reasons we do SEL is also about prevention. And so we look at that over a person's lifespan, that by age 14, about 50% of mental illness will kind of make some sort of appearance at that age, and then 75% by age 24. So it really does impact people or our students at a young age. The next piece is that from the time a person begins to notice symptoms or different pieces of mental illness, it on average will take about 11 years before they actually receive treatment for that. And of course, the next statistic is pretty frightening, which is that suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. And lastly, that when we think about students who are involved in the juvenile justice system, about 70% of them also have a diagnosis of mental illness. So really showing how prevention is so key for just the overall health and wellness of a student over their lifespan.
And we really highlight these statistics not to scare anyone or anything along those lines, but really as a call to action. You know, there's a need to teach SEL in our schools. There's a need to know what is happening in mental health for our youth today, and what kind of interventions we can put in place.
So we're going to look at just what SEL looks like in District 89 across different grade levels. And I'll start with preschool. Preschool, I mean, SEL is embedded in just every minute that the students are in the classroom, from being able to wait their turn to separating from mom and dad, sharing, play skills, and just that was managing emotions. We do push-in services, so the psychologist and I are in every classroom once a week, sometimes just pushing in and playing and modeling skills, and then other times doing a direct lesson. We use the zones of regulation curriculum, so teaching kids about what zone they're in, what feelings look like, what they feel like, and then also tools they can use when they have different feelings. Some students might have more targeted goals and receive direct minutes with social work or speech or occupational therapy that all kind of have SEL embedded in some capacity.
Next, I'm going to speak to what social emotional learning looks like at the elementary level. So as Kristen Payne had mentioned, we do also work on the zones of regulation, which helps students to identify their feelings and kind of what zone they're in, and then talking about what things we can do to, you know, calm ourselves down and be able to manage those emotions. We also talk about big problem, small problem. Sometimes our students might be experiencing a little problem, but might have a big reaction. And so we talk about, you know, how we could maybe better respond to things. So the social workers, we are going into the classroom every week, and we are co-teaching with the classroom teacher, and we're focusing on, you know, being a good friend, having effective communication skills, setting goals for ourselves, self-esteem, mindfulness is something that we've really been trying to push a lot of, and just overall encouraging the students to be ready, responsible, safe, and the best learners that they can.
Okay, I'll talk about SEL in middle school. If you have a middle school student, you might hear them refer to PRIDE, which is what we have named kind of our SEL lessons. But they're based on the same competencies that students are learning in elementary school. So we focus on those 5 competencies as well. We this year are implementing it across different departments. So this week, if you have a middle school student, they would have possibly already, but at some point this week had this lesson during literacy. So really embedded across the curriculum and with different teachers having opportunities to have meaningful conversations with students about SEL. So they are doing those lessons every few weeks based on the different SEL competencies.
Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about how to bring SEL in the home. So a couple tips that can be beneficial to have that consistency from school within the home environment is one, establishing routines. So we know that kids typically thrive with consistency and they tend to like that routine. So having a routine of what to do in the morning and then, wake up, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, how that looks. And then when the kids come home from school, what is their expectation at that given time? Is it to do homework? Is it a sporting event or a place to go? So establishing those routines. And then another tip to use is connecting with your child. So when your child comes home, being able to have a nice conversation by asking specific questions as opposed to general questions. So asking, what was challenging today? Why was that challenging? How can we navigate through that next time? Rather than, or comparing that to, how was your day? And also modeling at home, modeling how you as a parent handle certain situations. This can be self-care. How do you take care of yourself? And then being able to model that and explain it to your child, maybe doing this together as an activity. Maybe, if you have an animal at home, being able to take it for a walk or reading together, finding joy in everyday activities, and making that a part of their routine. And then the next tip we have for home is normalizing feelings. And this can be by validating the child's feelings, being able to relate to them and where they're coming from, why they're feeling a specific way, and talking about how to problem through it, what can you do next time? So really having that child feel heard. And then the last tip is having your children help with different chores and projects within the home environment. This can really help those executive functioning skills. So being able to learn some responsibility with, taking out the trash, helping set up the dinner table, whatever it may be, just really helping the kids start developing those skills at a young age can really help them and keep those skills throughout the rest of their life.
Okay, so I'm going to start talking about SEL screeners. We've talked about a lot of acronyms tonight between CASEL, SEL, and now the BESS. The BESS stands for the Behavioral and Emotional Screening System, and it's an SEL screener. So just as we collect information about students' reading and math levels and track their growth, an SEL screener can help us track students' SEL skills, their social emotional skills, how they're functioning, helping them put interventions in place for their feelings and to increase positive relationships. Okay, so that's what an SEL screener does. And why do we have SEL screeners? Why do we use them? We know that social and emotional factors are the most powerful influence over student achievement. And schools are the perfect environment to put prevention and intervention in place. We use screeners because they're fast. And they help us identify students who could be at risk for some internalizing types of behaviors that we may not see in the school setting or in a busy household. So we see, those SEL screeners really help us identify those types of behaviors. So there are many types of SEL screeners on the market for schools to use. District 89 has chosen to use the BESS, which is a product of Pearson, a major testing and assessment company. And it's kind of a shorter version of the BASC-3, which is widely used by our social workers and psychologists in the evaluation of students who are really struggling with social emotional issues throughout their day. So the BASC offers that reliable, quick, and systematic way to determine a student's behavioral and emotional strength and weakness of children and adolescents in preschool through high school. However, we're going to use a self-report with our students during this year, the 21-22 school year. So only 3rd through 8th graders will actually be taking the self-reporting assessment. There's not a self-report for kindergarten through 2nd. So we're going to focus this year with using the screener with 3rd through 8th. There's 28 questions. I'll give you a little preview of the questions on the next slide. It's all administered and scored electronically. And it's really important to remember that this is a screening assessment. It's one data point. It does not weigh heavier than a parent's knowledge about their child or any adult at school. It is one data point to help us really identify students that might be struggling in some way and to measure their progress in the acquisition of social emotional skills. So some of the questions, which are really actually statements, are presented to students in very simple, plain language, and the student will rate their feeling about that statement using a Likert scale. Never, sometimes, often, and always. And we'll be kind of talking about what those words mean a little bit with students, because that sometimes and often can easily be kind of confused. But these are just some sample statements from the actual assessment. I get along with my teacher. Never, sometimes, often, always. I'm good at making decisions. I'm happy with who I am. Those types of questions are nationally normed throughout this assessment and can give us a good idea of where students are within these risk indexes. So an internalizing risk index, so internalizing meaning students who might be experiencing anxiety, more internal types of behaviors that we don't necessarily see, right? Those really kind of hidden worries and fears that sometimes parents see at home for sure, but they're able to kind of bottle that up and keep that inside. Our self-regulation risk index is more of those externalizing behaviors, that impulsivity, problems with attention in class, distractedness. Those types of behaviors would fall under the self-regulation risk index. And the personal adjustment risk has a lot to do with your self-esteem, your ability to transition from one task to the next, kind of those adaptive skills, those personal adjustment skills. And all 3 of those areas will be on a parent report that will get sent home to families under what's called the Behavior and Emotional Risk Index. That's the nationally normed 8 by age score that will come out. It'll come out as a raw score as well as a percentile for families to see. Along with, you know, the number that falls into these different risk indexes, they're associated with colors. So there's red, yellow, and green. Green would mean that there's a low level risk for that certain index, yellow, an average risk, and red, an elevated risk. So what do we do with this data? Obviously, we haven't used a screener before in 89. So our initial uses will be to help us inform the school-wide interventions that are put in place for behavioral skills and emotional skills at school. It could be the focus of classroom learning, SEL classroom learning. It could be the focus of tiered and focused groups for students that might be struggling in a certain area to reteach those types of SEL skills in that group within our MTSS multi-tiered systems of support. And it also always can be to anticipate the mental health needs of our students. So panelists, did I miss anything about the BESS? That's a great question. I see. How often is this used? We will be doing the screener 3 times a year. It will be administered sometime in October. We're shooting for mid-October. We just want to make sure that we are really thoughtfully and intentionally communicating with families about the use of this screener, since it is new to us. And we want to make sure that families have a chance to have a conversation with their social worker or principal, myself, about their child's participation within this assessment.